Carrie Pergerson.
Happy
How are
Ligon.
you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am great. Hello, friends. Thank you for joining this webinar today. I'm super excited because I get to see one of my very favorite people in the whole wide world, Carrie Pergerson. Without Carrie's work and support, the Hinge team couldn't function. So I'm grateful that you're here, Carrie. Thank you for joining and pulling yourself away from spreadsheets and details and computers for a little bit to talk to us about what's important when we're running a process and how you can make that easier by preparing way ahead of time. So thanks.
All right. I always say it makes my inner nerd very happy. So I'm happy to talk about it as much as you want.
You're the only person in the world who feels that way. No, I'm
Probably.
kidding. Carrie makes it seem easy and pleasant. So we are talking to you guys today about what a diligence process looks like. So Carrie's job in the Hinge process is to manage a transaction once it's under contract until the time it closes. We believe that most people stay really focused on what happens up until the time it's under contract. And that is a big deal. You want to vet your buyers. You want to be sure they're the right culture fit. You want to be sure they're the right value fit. You want to run a competitive process and be sure that you are choosing the very best option for yourself, your team, and your families. Also, there is a tremendous amount of work that goes into getting that deal closed and in a way that doesn't disrupt your business, in a way that will properly protect you after you close, and in a way that won't make you want to jump off the ledge, even though I think Carrie regularly says there will be at least one point when you will want to jump off the ledge, but that's okay. Carrie's there to help with kindness. I'll also say that these concepts are applicable whether you are considering exiting at some point. Let me just say you're going to exit at some point. It's just a fact of life. We're all going to exit. I'm going to exit. Something will happen to cause us all to exit. And from the day you start your business, you should be thinking about your succession plan. And that can be a lot of things. It doesn't have to be a sale. It could be a transition to a new generation or to a team member. So there are many different ways to exit. You can also apply all of these concepts if you're in growth mode. So a tremendous number of our clients are in growth mode right now, taking advantage of the market and its conditions. And that is one way to increase the value of your company eventually, is to grow. So if part of your growth plan is to acquire operating businesses, you can also take this same information and be sure you're protected as a buyer. You want to know that what you're paying for is what you're going to get, and that you are protected in all the ways that Carrie's going to talk to us about. So before we get started, have a couple of things I want to share with you guys that are going on over in Hinge World right now. Carrie, can you see my screen here?
I can see it. Looks good.
Yay, I did it. I'm not the most technologically advanced, so it's always a good day when I get that right. So first of all, here's some of the services the Hinge team does, and specifically related to what we're talking about today, which is to provide valuations of businesses. Really important in knowing how to make change and create value. We're going to talk a little more about that. We source buyers with over 100 active buyers in our database to create competitive environments that drive options for you as a seller, but also price. And then to manage the transaction, we almost never don't close the transaction. I should say that in the positive way. It's rare that we don't close a transaction. We have a 95% close rate. And that 1%, I believe we're going to get done later. That remaining 5%, I think we're going to get done later this year. So really good track record in helping sellers get closed. We are on a real high over here at Hinge. We just left our first in-person Thrive event since before COVID. We had so much fun. We were in Chicago at the Pendry. Our Thrive event is an event where we meet with owners one-on-one to help them identify their best financial opportunities. And then we have a full day of financial content to help them align their company with best practices financially and get them on track for the best future value possible. So that was super fun. Look for another one sometime. I don't know. We all want to do it again soon because we just had a great time there. In addition to our Thrive workshop, we have a QuickBooks online training class coming up on the May 23rd. Christine Mailer from our team has worked with us to customize a QuickBooks training for childcare businesses in the format that the Hinge team likes, so that you can easily benchmark your company against other companies. So if you're on QuickBooks or thinking about QuickBooks, you might want to drop into that. Our mastermind groups were full for the spring, but are enrolling for the second half of the year. These groups were so successful. We launched at the beginning of January, led by rock star Alita Mechtel. We sold Alita's 3 schools a couple of years ago, and she is a certified coach and talented in bringing like-minded people together to brainstorm where they are with their businesses. If you'd like more information about that, there's a URL there. Also a scan here if you'd like to know more about our conferences and Hinge news. So I'll pause on that for 10 seconds if anyone wants to scan it. Move on. And also, we are launching registration for our 6th annual and 20th anniversary Shift Conference coming up in our home state of South Carolina in Charleston at the beautiful Charleston Place downtown. Look for that June 30th. Hope to see you guys there. And we are going to dive in to our content now. So what we want to talk about now is to be prepared before you need to be prepared. It's very similar to growth in adding new schools. I always say to owners, you have to be ready before you're ready. You have to be ready before the opportunity comes. And you never know in this aggressive buying environment when someone's going to reach out or you're going to feel like the time is right and you get a great opportunity to exit. And you make the decision to do that. You just want to be prepared for all the options. So what we want to talk about today is what systems you have in place. We want to talk about your team as an important asset in your company's value. We want to talk about changes you can make to be as financially healthy as possible, which is the basis of the valuation of your company. And we want you to start thinking about what information you need to have available or accessible in a process. A couple of notes before I turn this over to Carrie to download for us all of her wealth of knowledge and how to run a process. Here are a couple of quick updates on how processes have changed or what the current situation is of buying and selling processes. First of all, this is great news for sellers, not so good news for buyers, but business values are at an all-time high. I've said that every year for several years, and it's still the truth every time I say it. We are seeing values at a level that I haven't seen in my 38 years in the industry. That makes me super excited for people who have developed their companies and who deserve to be rewarded around that. I get kind of preachy there, so I'll try to stay off my soapbox for this moment, but we're very pleased that that's happening. Part of the reason for that is there has been so much new and increased interest from historic buyers and new buyers. And anytime you have a competitive situation like that, it drives prices up. On the other side of that, we're seeing more structure in deals, meaning that we have successfully been launching and closing deals for companies that aren't fully ramped yet, but they're on the path for ramp. What that usually means is that part of the money gets paid in cash at close for the mature schools. Part of it can be realized in the future as those schools get stronger. So we're seeing more of that. We're seeing an increase in the level of detail needed to run a process. You'll see Carrie's very long list and understand that in just a minute. Because of that, processes can take longer if we don't stay behind both sides of the process. The Hinge runs a very scripted process with very tightly controlled check-in dates to be sure that we move that as quickly as possible. And because of both of those things, it can be tiring. So we try to keep our sellers motivated and upbeat during that process. So, Carrie, I'm sure I'm doing something crazy here. I am going to turn over to you now to talk about what should be in place and what to expect, and appreciate you sharing that knowledge with us.
Sure. So many of you may already have systems in place, meaning programs, whether they're online or they're licensed to your specific computers in the school. But we have alternatives, as well as just talking about those programs in general. So the key ones are financials. And before I get started, feel free in the chat to post any specific programs you're using to share with others who are participating in the webinar. We work with a variety of different companies who provide programs, but it's always great to hear what people are really using, and just is always helpful. But for financials, if you are using a program, which most people typically are, some people truly just work off of bank statements, but if you're using a program, we definitely recommend go ahead and run monthly financials. That means run profit and loss statements, balance sheets. It would be great to just go ahead and run those by month, not only for you to track, but also for you to save in a folder. And so then you'll have them ready. You'll see on a future slide, we're going to go over the typical time frame that's requested during diligence. But with those profit and loss statements, going back to what Kathy said a few minutes ago, a service that we do provide at Hinge is some financial services. Christine and Zach and Stephanie, they will help you with QuickBooks training if that's the program that you're using. It's great to get your financials shored up, to see where you are falling in line with different expense categories and so forth. But the biggest thing for diligence to prepare is just to have those monthly P&Ls and balance sheets. You can go and have them ready or accessible for you to run at the time. As far as staff, there are programs, of course, will track hours, but also ones, and this may just be your payroll. If you're using a payroll vendor, many of those payroll vendors have reports that you can run that will track benefits and paid time off for vacation and sick time. And then some of them even have a great report you can run to look for terminated employees. I think what I've seen helpful over the years is that when people are tracking their terminated employees, they start tracking open positions and seeing if there are any trends in staffing they need to work on. Do they need to hire differently for certain job positions? So some buyers during diligence do ask for a report on terminated employees. For enrollment, all buyers are going to ask for a certain period of time of monthly enrollment. And some programs that we see owners use are great at providing this, and some have a flaw or a glitch, I should say, where it won't show accurate historical enrollment. It'll, if you look for a certain time period in a report, it actually pulls up the child's current classroom. It's an odd thing that's happened. But if you can go ahead and run monthly enrollment reports, again, it's just going to be very helpful to you business-wise, operationally, but run them by classroom or by age group. And just have those, again, we'll go over the period of time on, I think, the next slide. Kathy, you can go ahead and, oh, you just went ahead. Okay. Some of this we've already talked about. So what changes should you be making with the systems you currently have? So we've been doing this as a company for a while, obviously. I've been with Hinge for going on 8 years, and so much has changed, but it's also been a great lesson just to see how different schools operate. Where I see people, what they need to do or changes they need to make are really using the report functions in their systems. Oftentimes we see where schools aren't even using all of the functions that are available, but more importantly, the report function. And this is where, if you start running reports, again, you're going to start seeing trends within your school, maybe some things to tighten up on, to have your staff change and work on and improve. And so not only for diligence, but also just operationally to help, work towards increasing the value of your business. And the tracking we've already talked about. It'll just help you see where your enrollment's going, where it's been, look at your staff with open, open positions and so forth. Okay. Now, what I'm going to show you on these next couple of slides, do not think this is all that is required in diligence. I wish it was. The list is much more extensive, but these are the key things that we see. Some of these are things that trip our clients up during the diligence process with trying to retrieve and look for. Tax returns, that's typically not too hard, but I would go ahead and have a folder with at least up to 5 years, usually 3 to 5 years of tax returns. That can also include state returns and personal property returns, or anything specific to your state or to your city or county. We talked about the monthly financial statements, the profit and loss statements, and the balance sheets. And either you can work with your CPA to help you with these. You can run them in-house. Maybe you have a bookkeeper on staff. The key is just to start having these accessible to you. Bank statements. This is one of the least favorite requests I see, because you typically have to submit or upload up to 36 months of bank statements. No, I don't know anybody that keeps, well, I shouldn't say anybody, but it's very rare that we see clients who keep bank statements on file, either digitally or on paper. And the banks will only typically let you see a 12-month period of bank statements that you can download. They're PDFs. So what would be helpful is just go ahead when you each month or maybe each quarter, download those bank statements, keep them in a folder on your hard drive or on a USB, and also bank reconciliations. Some people run their bank reconciliations via their financial program, like via QuickBooks. So those are helpful to have monthly as well. Subsidy deposits. If you receive government and federal subsidies, it would be helpful to have, well, number one, you're going to have those records on file anyway, typically for that subsidy provider. But to have your subsidy deposits, to be tracking those. Another part of diligence, just so you know, does ask a lot of times, well, they will need the per child subsidy authorizations, because those authorizations show the time period they're covered for, the amount they're covered for, etc. Corporate, this is always a much shorter diligence section. And just to pause for a minute, whenever I think about diligence, I like to advise clients, think about it as in buckets. So financials a bucket, corporate, we're going to see some more on the next slide in a minute, HR and enrollment. So we try to think about things just in chunks. As Kathy said, diligence can get overwhelming. So there's different ways I handle it with clients. It's really how they want to receive the information. Some people dive right into the entire list. Some prefer to see it just section by section. Financials always going to be the first section we start with, because that's the most important to the buyer. But under corporate, just to have on hand, just to know where they are or where you can locate them, articles of incorporation, which you can get online from your Secretary of State. Some states do require that you pay a small fee to obtain those. If you have any shareholder documents or actual share certificates. And then if you've had a prior business partner that you've bought out, it's really good to have any of those legal documents on hand. And Kathy can go to the next. Legal and licensing. Very often I hear, we don't have any legal issues. Well, really think about it and start tracking that. I mean, it could be just a prior staff member who had an employment claim. And of course, you know, a lot of schools do have potential or historical or you know, current litigation issues. That's not an uncommon thing. So any documentation pertaining to those, you're going to want to keep on file. Also under legal and licensing are your normal permits and licenses. This is another one where people think, well, I just have a childcare license or maybe a business license. Not every state or governmental agency or county requires a business license. But there's also permits that people forget about. Their health or sanitation permit, food handling permit. And some people have a special use permit, which is for their zoning. Well, all right, I see some questions popping and we'll go over those in just a minute. I want to talk 1 second on zoning. So in a couple of months, we're going to probably do a webinar about some things that we see clients getting some roadblocks. One of these recently has been zoning. Number one, you want to know what your zoning is. And then if you do not have a commercial or one specified for childcare, that is something you may want to go ahead and start working on with that department of your county or your city. Litigation, we've already talked about that. That pertains to staff and children, of course, parents included. And then operations. This is a section that typically encompasses many different things, but these are just some key items within operations that a buyer will want to see. We've already talked about enrollment reports. I recommend doing those back to 2019. 2020 was just a wash. We still provide those, but so going back to 2019, even though that seems so many years ago, that just gives a more clear historical view versus 2020. Again, what you'd want to do is look at that by age group or classroom. Handbooks to staff and parent. I'm sure you probably are going to have those very easily on hand, and those can be PDFs or Word versions. Vendors. This is another one that takes a while to build out because it is very hard. It's just like your personal finances. You forget about all the different things that you have subscriptions to or contracts with, or just that you pay monthly. So this is one I would just really recommend if you are not able to run a report, let's say in QuickBooks, or you don't already have these on hand, just start building out your own vendor list in Excel or Word. And just to track who you do business with. And then even more importantly than that is to keep track of ones that you have actual contracts and agreements with. Even if you feel like those have expired, those still have terms and conditions that could apply. So when someone buys your school, they're going to want to see those contracts to look at the terms and conditions. Some of them they may decide to assume those contracts, meaning take over those. So those are things that are hard to obtain. So a lot of times you have to reach back out to the vendor to say, hey, can I get a copy of that executed contract that we had back in 2018? For insurance, there's a couple of things I want to touch on with this. The easiest part is you need to have a PDF of your current policy. Whenever you go through your insurance renewal, I'm sure that your agent probably sends you a PDF of these or some type of documentation, but that's something that you can easily request. And buyers will want to see this because they'll obviously want to see what levels of coverage you have. And also they'll want to see what coverages period you have. One thing that I have on here is review the policies you have in place. Insurance has been just a sticking point lately where owners don't always know exactly what they have and maybe don't have the coverage in place that other schools have. One that we have seen that is you really should have in place is a physical abuse and molestation policy. So if that's not something you have in place, we definitely recommend that you talk to your agent. And also there are insurance agents who are very specific to the child care industry. So that's something, if you need assistance with finding other carriers, you can always reach out and we can share some contacts and information we have. Don't run this right now, but one thing that you will have to have at the time of diligence is loss run reports. And that is something that your insurance agent will run for every line of coverage you have. And it's typically just historical to when you've had that insurance company or carrier. And there are times, like let's say you just changed insurance carriers the year before, you would have to go back to that prior carrier and get that loss run report. Those are very important to the buyers because they're going to look at any claims that were filed and that were actually paid out on by the insurance carriers.
Carrie, would you like to go ahead and comment on the question about corporate documents?
Okay. So corporate documents, this really, and Kathy, feel free to chime in afterwards as well. This especially comes into play with stock purchases. When Kathy was talking earlier about, things that have changed in the process, we all used to always do, and Kathy may speak on this later as well, we used to always do asset purchases, or we didn't, but the transactions were asset purchases. It was where the assets and, the FF&E and cash and so forth were part of the transaction, or revenue, I should say. But with with COVID, post-COVID, many transactions now are stock that has to do with grant funding and different COVID funds that have come in. So with stock purchases, they need to see the corporate documents to make sure how the entity is set up, because they're actually taking over your legal entity. And Kathy, do you want to speak to that at all, or clarify anything I've said?
Yeah, that's exactly it, Carrie. There are two ways that a company can be sold, a business can be sold. The first way is to sell its assets only, with assets being largely goodwill, but also furniture, fixtures, equipment, vehicles. The second way to sell a company is to sell its stock, meaning the new buyer takes over the actual entity, like Carrie said. So to review corporate documents is mainly to confirm the entity type, and there's some tax ramifications, grant ramifications, licensing ramifications attached to all of those, whether it's asset or stock, and the entity type.
Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Staff and HR. This one's pretty clear-cut. Payroll records. For historical payroll records, typically buyers want to see a year-end summary, and that does include each person and includes their year-end totals. Shows their their hours or their benefits, deductions, and so forth. And then usually a much more detailed report by employee for the past 12 months. Sometimes it's asking, by month, sometimes it's by payroll period, but to have those on hand would be very helpful, or just as long as you know how to run those. And one thing I didn't bring up is in transactions, sometimes sellers don't have access to, they don't run the payroll, they don't do their financials. So before you decide, okay, now is the time to exit, I want to start checking into this process, either you need to know how to get a hold of those documents, or possibly consider including your bookkeeper who works within your school in on the process. You're going to need help. And it is very hard, obviously, if it's just the owner who does not have access to anything else, for them to obtain information. So that's something just to think ahead on with a process, is having an internal structure, internal team to help you with this. If you have a director who you're very, very close with, or maybe it's more an operations manager or regional manager, someone who can help you gather documents, because it is a lot. Under staff and HR, that includes employee benefits. So if you provide any employee benefits, whether it's health, dental, vision, voluntary benefits, And then benefits can also mean, of course, your paid time off, vacation, sick time, also cell phones, any fringe benefits, employee discounts. So anything that's a benefit to the employee, we'll have to provide documentation on that. Facilities and real estate, if you lease your facility, of course, the original leases and any amendments. And then floor plans, there, if you have a past survey, or if you have site plans, there's not as much on the facility side. They do ask if you've had any environmental issues, any environmental reports, if there are any easement issues. So it's a much simpler category that we work with on diligence. Marketing and IT, really just examples of what you provide to parents during tours, and if there's anything else you provide at enrollment, your logos. And then it'd be good to go ahead and start an inventory of your IT equipment. And that could just be, we have, iPads in each classroom, and then list any computers that you have and so forth. The login list, that is something that you're going to be providing either at close or right at close, or even could be post close. It's all kind of sometimes right at the end. Those are going to be logins for your various vendors or for your cameras. So that's something that if you have ahead of time, that's going to be helpful, so you're not scrambling towards the end to work on those.
Carrie, really good question about whether there's a pricing discount related to whether you choose a stock or an asset transaction. We have not seen a difference between the two. Occasionally we have a transaction that starts as one or the other, and because of something that was unknown, it switches to the other with no pricing changes. When we enter a transaction representing a seller, we always make a decision about our preference for what type of transaction it is in advance, and we promote it that way. And generally, we are able to steer it in the direction we want. Carrie mentioned some really important things with occasionally grant funds will be lost if we run an asset transaction instead of stock. So those are some reasons that we might either change our mind or steer it in a certain direction.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we can go on to the next. Oh, Kathy, before you go over this, I want to go over a few other things just about the diligence process in general. We have worked with clients who have any and every kind of system you can imagine in place. We've worked with schools who have zero systems, who just have strictly work off of paper, whether it's paper sign-in sheets, paper, anything. So we are not advocating that you have to go and spend a lot of money on systems. If they help your school, obviously you don't want to purchase something unless you truly use it. So what we're advocating is use what you have. And if you feel like there is a system that'll help, benefit your operations, then that is a good use of your money. The bottom line would be, we're going to help you no matter what. So whether you present a box of paper that you scan over to us or mail to us, or if it's, or if you have all the systems in place and we just help figure out what reports you need to run, we will get it done, because we have gotten that done. It could make the process a little bit longer if there aren't certain systems in place. But one thing you can do, that's really all you need, is just to have Excel. So Microsoft Excel. You can create all kinds of systems on your own. I'm happy to talk to anybody, via phone or email, if you want to talk through how would I start setting this up. But what you could do is just start an Excel document, and you could do a tab for each of the different kind of buckets, as I call them. Financial, you don't really need to start that. You've got your financial reports that you could run, whether it's QuickBooks or like I said, some schools truly operate off of Excel. We've seen that, where someone had their CPA used Excel for their financials, and he was able to run any and everything that the buyer requested. It was impressive. but you can set up a tab, one to, on staff, start your own staff roster. And this is going to help you for many reasons. Maybe your payroll system can run this for you, but if your payroll system is not very, doesn't have many reports, or maybe you use a local payroll company and they truly just run payroll reports for you, start an Excel spreadsheet and just simply have staff names, keep their addresses, their contact information, and then, of course, include their hire date. It'd be good to have their birth dates, any benefits they have through you, like if they've elected medical, dental, whatever it is. And then also track, one of the other grown moments of diligence is providing the PTO, what they've accrued and what they've actually used. That is something that you're going to have to provide, especially right at closing, what amount of PTO is left over, because that typically has to be paid out by you as the owner. This is what you have, that they've accrued, that you've saved up from their paychecks. And so you need to know, and so you want to give yourself time to be able to calculate that. And then you could do a tab for everything. If you could do equipment, if you have copiers, if you have printers, you can keep track of that. One thing we didn't talk about is not only vendor contracts, but if you have copiers that you lease, you're going to need to provide those copier leases. That will be a discussion point of the process, whether you have to pay those out or whether those will be assumed or taken over by the buyer. Vehicles, it would be a very good idea to do a vehicle tab or a vehicle list. Just keep the VIN numbers, the make and model of the vehicles, the year of those, to track that information. If you have vehicles, you're going to have drivers within your school. Keep a list of those who are approved drivers, and you keep their driver's license numbers in that list. We talked about vendors. With that, what I would do is keep the company names, the service it provides, and then of course make a note of if you have a contract or agreement with them. The more detailed vendor list that we have to complete sometimes ask for like the monthly amount you pay, and then how you pay that, whether it's a draft or a credit card, if you mail a check. Also, buyers will want to know, do you have any handshake agreements? I know that sounds silly, but I remember one buyer saying, well, we asked about this because one time we bought a school, and then about 2 weeks after we purchased the school, somebody showed up and he said, I'm here to do the pine straw. And he said that he had a verbal agreement with the owner that he provided pine straw, I can't remember the frequency, but he expected to be paid to put out the pine straw. So, especially for local vendors, a lot of times you have those verbal agreements, so you'll forget about those. But the more that you can capture in that Excel document or the Word or however you want to keep it, that's going to help you track again how you're running your school, but also it'll really help you with collecting that diligence information and documents. So, Kathy, I think I've preached probably enough on that.
Well, that was terrific, Carrie. Thank you. I am chuckling because Carrie, although that sounds like a lot and Carrie makes it sound simple, it can be to varying degrees. We have buyers in our processes that have very short diligence requirements, and we have some that have very extensive diligence requirements, and that's where the experience of a team who has likely worked with them before at some point can benefit you by knowing what you're about to go into. I want to talk a minute here about what things to start doing now to maximize the value in your company if you are planning to exit. I like a 3-year window. You can actually do a lot in a 1-year window. But the team at Hinge likes to help people evaluate where they are financially well ahead of the sale. We finished evaluation just this morning, and I was so excited to see the tremendous value this operator has created in their business, and excited to talk to them about it. But when I sent them a woohoo about the valuation, they said, well, you're pushing us on tuition rate increases. It's what caused this. So those are the kinds of things that we can help people do that make a huge difference in their eventual value if we have a bit of time. So the first bullet point here just says that the value of a business is based on its cash flow. And if you think about that logically, an investor, you might be the investor, you might be the seller, but if you're the investor, what you want to know is, when I invest my money in this business, how am I going to get that investment returned? How many years is it going to take me to recoup my investment? That's where the multiple comes in. So to determine the go forward cash flow, and the words I said there that are very important are go forward. So it's important as a place to start what the historical data was, but also the buyer knows that some things will be slightly different when they take over. Some common things are occasionally rent will change, owner expenses are eliminated if those owners are exiting and those expenses go away. As an owner, you can pay yourself whatever you want, you can spend money however you want in your company, but as long as those expenses go away after the sale, then they come out of the valuation. So those are some of the things that the Hinge team is adjusting when we create a valuation for people. So Carrie mentioned financials by month, and I'm really happy that you did that, Carrie. It's not only a good selling practice, it's a good company management practice to be sure that you get timely information so you can make good business decisions. But there are slight tweaks in operations that can really drive the cash flow upward, with a focus on the most recent 12 months, usually. So although they're asking for numbers from 3 years ago, sometimes people ask us for 5, they really just want to see the trend in where those numbers have gone, because the basis of the valuation doesn't matter what happened 5 years ago. What matters is where you are right now. Now, there's some special cases with newer or ramping schools where we can use a shorter than 12-month period and then project out. We also have been very successful at projecting out new schools if we have a group of schools with a proven ramp history. So again, cash flow drives the value. Small changes in things like eliminating discounts to better reflect where the market is and increase value, being more assertive with tuition rate increases. It's rarely around cost management that we find our best opportunities. It's usually around tuition rate increases and elimination of discounting. I'll just say this broadly, I get on a big soapbox here, but except for discounts for staff, the industry has largely moved away from discounting. And that actually happened, it began to happen about 10 years ago, so way before COVID. And what I call discounting is a hidden danger, because most people don't record the gross tuition minus the discount to get the net tuition. Most people record the net tuition, never really knowing what that's costing them. Our framework app can help, so use that as a resource if you like. But driving the value of your company, the underlying determiner of that is the cash flow. So up-to-date systems and processes. Carrie has spoken a lot about this. It plays very heavily into her work through a diligence process, but also I will say that we predict a range of value for businesses that we launch. We don't name prices. We let the market determine the price. we would have left a lot of money on the table had we named prices the last couple of years in a upward trajectory of value. However, up-to-date systems is one of those things that push you closer to the top of that range of value. So investors want to know that they can come in and not freak everyone out because they have to have more sophisticated systems. So you really need a solid parent billing system in a perfect world that allows you to either pull tuition payments or allows them to send you tuition payments or both. A parent communication app is fantastic. You really want cameras in the classroom. You don't need to share those with families, but you do need to record. Most people will record up to about 30 days. Carrie mentioned payroll systems. If you guys have favorite payroll systems or parent billing systems, pop them in the chat box. But you do need to be sure you understand where the industry is and align yourself more closely with top buyers. The second thing is a strong team. And I like to say it this way. It's like being a parent. Your only job is to work your way out of a job. Your job is to help that person not need you anymore. You will know you've done your work when you're not needed. And for a owner to be able to step back, well, first of all, it's a beautiful thing in your life when you can go on vacation and not have to be there every second. But also investors want to know that they can come in and it's not going to be a train wreck when one person leaves, because that person controls all their relationships. And it takes time, right? I'm a business owner too. I'm doing this just like you guys are. And over time, we need to pull our people up, assign more responsibilities so that one day we can go off to the beach and everything will be fine. But that's what investors are looking for. They want a business that can easily transition without you. The last thing here is the quality of the real estate. It really doesn't matter as much about the age of the real estate, because you can really invest well and keep your real estate looking practically brand new. Be sure that you're up to date on current branding. And when I say branding, I don't mean colors and names. I do partially mean that, but not just that. I mean, what does it look like from the outside? Do you have a fantastic signage? Is your building up to date, or is the landscaping great? When you come in the building, is it fresh and modern? And is there evidence of branding? When you answer the phone or your team answers the phone, what do they say? How do they conduct the tour? What are your unique selling points? And does your team articulate that well to prospective parents? So quality of real estate and branding is a wide spectrum, but we have seen 20-year-old schools, 30-year-old schools that look practically brand new, but you have to stay on top of it. I'll make one more comment on that, in that the national brands have super aggressive growth strategies right now into markets they've never been in. And bright and shiny speaks to consumers. In the absence of other information, and I think this parent group that we have today is more sophisticated than any other parent group we've ever had. But the first thing that attracts them, and sometimes the thing that makes the difference, is the quality of the real estate, how it looks inside, how it feels inside. Is it modern? Is it up to date? Be sure that you don't lose your customer base because you're not keeping up and bright and shiny moves in. We have a great question about whether cameras need to have audio or is just video okay. Audio is kind of hard to hear anyway. So we see a mix. I think just video would be okay. Some of those do have audio, but I think you'd be okay if you just had video. And again, it was popular in the industry about 25 years ago that parents could view their children all day long. The providers who still do that put limitations around the amount of time that they can be on. So you might want to think about that. But largely the industry has moved away from that. And you would be fine with a camera, a monitor in your lobby where parents can check out what's going on when they walk out of the classroom. But also you're going to want to record a bit. Do centers who lease their space bring in lower sales prices? No, not at all. It's completely the same. So for most of the higher quality buyers, the majority don't also control their real estate. They will work with a partner to purchase your real estate, but they don't actually control it themselves. I will say that there are a handful of cases where buyers who have excellent credit do prefer to buy real estate because they can use their credit in the real estate to pay a higher value for the business and win the deal. But it doesn't damage it overall. One of the other things, and Carrie, you might have mentioned this, so sorry if you did, but be sure that if you have third-party landlords, you have a current lease with all of its addendums and documentation executed and available. If you have leased space, a new investor will likely want a lease assignment executed. So that's part of our legal process. Whether the lease gives you the right to assign it or not, they prefer that protection in the future. And usually that's not a problem. For our transactions, we're typically selling a smaller company to a larger company that's a little more financially secure. That's not to say you're not financially secure. It's just that larger companies usually make landlords a little more comfortable. So, but really good question.
Kathy, one thing just to tag on to that. I know this sounds really silly and simple, but this trips people up. Having executed documents, having the actual executed leases, like Kathy said, the addendums, the amendments, and also exhibits to leases. I don't know why that seems to be something that people just don't hang on to originally. They just don't think they'll need it at some point. But having, any documents like that, the executed version is super important, and also just any amendments, addendums, exhibits. So
really good point, Carrie. We have actually had some processes recently where our sellers forgot that addendums were executed. We're busy, it's just when those things happen and we find out in process, sometimes they require some adjustments in the process. So we like to have as few surprises as possible, but because we're protecting you in the deal that we struck for you. And so that's one of the reasons when Carrie is talking about what to have available and prepare in advance, we go through all those documents. So we are checking things, especially financial documents. So the Hinge team creates the valuation spreadsheet that we present for consideration. Your offer gets made off of the way we present your value. It's not from your raw financial statements, even though those are needed in a process to substantiate the value. But to maximize the go forward cash flow is an art. And a lot of people ask, really good question, what are multiples today? And that's a great question. I like to be sure that they understand there's a more important question, which is what number are you basing that multiple on? And to have someone experienced in knowing how to massage those numbers, what can be removed, what has to be added in, how to think about it, how to maximize the real estate value, those are really important to have. So last bit of information here is that we like to coach our clients to start way ahead of time in building a team of 3 professionals who all work together. The first one is a CPA that knows your business and you personally and knows the ramifications of transactions. So you might have a tax CPA, you might have a bookkeeper, but to have a person in a perfect world who understands the ramifications on a company and its tax structure is really important. Same thing with your individual attorney. Even though the Hinge team has 2 attorneys on our team, we want all of our sellers to be represented by a transaction attorney who understands their business and, again, the ramifications on them personally of all the decisions that are made around the legal agreements, the structure, and the future of the transaction way after the close. And lastly, of course, if we didn't believe strongly in our work, we wouldn't be here. We firmly believe that having an industry-specific advisor that understands the nuances of licensing and legal agreements, of structure of transactions, and is able to articulate what the buyers are actually doing and how they might behave, we feel like is critical in a process. We do get a very legitimate question sometimes, is, you know, I'm being contacted all the time by buyers, why shouldn't I do this myself? Well, the first answer I have is that maybe that person that contacts you is going to be the very best culture fit for your people and your parents and your staff, and maybe they're going to give you the best value. But how will you ever know unless you have the opportunity to interview multiple buying groups yourself and see what a competitive process can bring you, not just for value, but also for a great culture fit. So these 3 people work together very, very closely in a process to be sure that everyone is aligned. We're all talking to each other constantly, making recommendations, brainstorming issues and ways to get around it. So it's good to, well in advance of your transaction, start to build this team. So I am going to stop my share. I think we only have time for maybe one question. And really appreciate you again, Carrie, for taking the time. Let's see if anyone have a final question for the diligence guru here before we let her go back to spreadsheets.
While we're waiting on that, going back to why you should use an advisor, because like Kathy said, I mean, you can do it direct. I cannot imagine doing it direct with a buyer because, well, you could, but it would just be overwhelming. Not only by using an advisor, you're going to have someone to quarterback your process on behalf of you. But from Hinge, we have 2 financial analysts on staff. They're going to work with you through the quality of earnings, which is a very extensive process. That would be really hard to do on your own. And then, like Kathy said, I'm going to work with you once you're under a letter of intent all the way. Prior to letter of intent, we have people on our front end of the Hinge team who work with you on the marketing piece, on gathering that information. And a lot of the information, I know we're about out of time, but a lot of the information gathered for the marketing piece transcends into diligence. So we carry that over. So
I will make one last comment and in my thank you to you, Carrie, and that you guys can see just the mountain of information and organization that it takes to do the work that Carrie does. Her greatest value is in her kindness. And we just get regularly fantastic comments from sellers about how at ease they were with Carrie. And when they had the worst day ever, there was Carrie to help that. So we appreciate you, Carrie, and the work that you do on behalf of the community. We thank all of you for joining us. We'd love to hear from you about the success of your own growth. And of course, we're always here for anyone that wants to get started down the path with evaluation to see where they are today and then to make some decisions about getting stronger in the future. So take care and be well, friends, and we will see you soon.
Bye.